Okay, why is it recording? I didn't tell it to record. Why are you recording? I didn't tell you to record. Silly thing. Hello again. Thank you for joining me. My name is Rob. This is Rob's Cave 3.0. And we have a wonderfully rainy day here in coastal North Carolina. Expecting some strong storms later this afternoon. There were some pretty bad ones go through parts of Tennessee, Kentucky, Ohio, Illinois yesterday. And prayers going up for those people. Um, Today, I'm going to continue working on the restoration of the Revell Dave's Deal Swine Hunt car, which was, if you watched my first video on this part one, it was my Grail kit. It's the one of the first, or it is the first weird model kit that I ever built as a kid. I was 11 years old. It was 1970 when the model was released. And I'm ready to start taking it apart. I'm going to carefully document each piece. Hopefully, I won't do any damage. I am dealing with 50 some odd year old. I think 54 year old, either testers or Pactra glue. So we know how that is. Either it works or doesn't, or it completely bodges up everything, or it pops off easily. I won't know until I get into it. So let's go ahead and we'll get set up, and we will start the restoration. I forgot to press record when I started pulling it apart. Fortunately, I did take photographs of all of the pieces, each piece as I worked on it. So you'll be seeing that in the little montage with my dialogue as to what I'm doing. I guess it's a life of a YouTuber to forget to push record now and then. You get caught up in the excitement and the moment, and just forget. Sorry, but yeah, we'll go ahead and take a look at the progress that was made, and we got some good close-up shots documenting every piece. A couple of small pieces broke, but insignificant. So let's take a look at what I did and failed to record. This first image shows all of the parts laid out in order after I very carefully and painstakingly disassembled. I began with the turret and the driver figure, and as you can see, it's got that very badly applied paint job. Turning the turret over, I was able to access the small button that holds the driver figure to the turret. Next, I very carefully took a fresh X-Acto knife blade and began wedging it in between the parts of the turret where the glue did not quite get to it. There's a lot to be said for kids in the 1970s not using enough glue. Once the bottom of the turret was off, it was an easy matter to access the small button glued to the peg on the bottom of the driver figure. It came off with very little problem. Again, thanks to the use of very little glue in this part. Setting the button and the driver head aside, my next step was to very carefully try to remove the gun from the turret. Part of it was already loose from not having been assembled correctly to begin with, and the rest was very careful small scoring until the part came loose. As you can see, a majority of the glue was right in the center of the turret and not the barrel of the gun. This made it easy to completely remove the barrel without causing any further damage. Next, it was time to completely disassemble the gun barrel. For some reason, Revell thought it was easier and nicer to have a plug in the barrel of the gun because it was safe. Thankfully, the builder had not used as much glue on this model as it would first appear, and therefore it was easy to get a knife into the unglued seam on the barrel, which came apart quite nicely, leaving very little, if any, damage. I was able to then remove the peace sign, shown here with its ever-present ejection pin marks that most model kits in the 60s and 70s were noted for. And this is the front. Looks pretty nice. Here is where the peace sign had been glued in. Again, a very small amount of glue was used, so it wasn't very difficult to remove this piece. Here is the top of the gun barrel, and as you can see, the part was not cut carefully from the tree. Rather, it was what we referred to as pull and twist, or twist and pull. Here is another example of the twist and pull just behind the baffle on the gun barrel. Next, I moved on to the body itself to see where I wanted to go next. Overall, the car still appears to need some work. Here you can see the dreaded twist and pull marks on the bottom of the fenders. Bottom of the car body did not look too bad. You can see some glue remnants from where it was still on the chassis. The chassis itself was painted with what I can only assume was Tester's silver paint. Silver paint was really, really strong and good back in the day. Here we're looking down into the chassis. The right-hand side of the chassis was painted with gloss black paint. You can also see where the builder put the intakes upside down on the dual carburetors on this side. The other side was also incorrectly put together. The wheels and tires for the front were already disassembled. Here they are laid out, ready to be cleaned. The same with the rear tires. The whip antenna only had a little bit of paint. That should come off easily in the sonic cleaner. Here are some miscellaneous parts: the helmet, the headlight that was already off, the tail light. The small red item is the speaker from the phone. The red down on the bottom right is the carburetor, and on the left is the intakes in the correct orientation. Here is another example of the twist and pull on the body. Same thing here. Next, I began to try to remove the remaining headlight using a pair of smooth needle nose. The headlight was loose, so it was just a matter of getting it the rest of the way out. I then moved on to the fog lights, which came out with no problem at all. The headlight, however, did break, but that's not a big deal since it's identical to the other one, and I can do a cast of that one quite easily or glue this one back together. I'll decide when I get to it. Next, I moved on to remove the gas cap. Here you can see that the gas cap has some glue sticking out from under it, which is typical of when you're an 11-year-old building a car. It popped off with no problem. Here you can see the glue and what it had done. In this case, it does appear as if a little too much glue was used, which did soften some of the surrounding plastic and will be no problem to address. Next, we moved on to the tail light. As you can see on the left, one tail light was already off, and so that one is in the safety bag. This one popped off with no problem at all. Here you can see there wasn't as much glue on this one. Next, I went to tackle the telephone. I did a small scribe line just to see if there was any glue sticking up. That was not the case. Fortunately, the telephone does have a small overhang, and there's an open gap there in which I can put my knife and pry bar. Again, it popped off with no issue, and you can see the points where the glue had been applied when the model was originally built. Telephone is all in one piece and safe. The paint should come off with no problem in the sonic cleaner. The small machine gun popped off with no problem, and I barely even had time to think about it before it did come off in my hand. Here you can see there's a very, very tiny bit of glue, and of course part of the machine gun housing was still left on the model. This will be addressed as the rebuild continues. Next, I moved on to the motor. The motor has this little spider web of the exhaust. Here again, you can see the carburetors with the incorrectly mounted intakes. The motor came out with no issue. I thought there would be some problems with the exhausts having been glued in, but there was no problem. Here you can see the chassis with the motor removed. Next, it was time to attack the spider web of the exhaust. It came off with no issue, in two pieces as they were originally made. This will be fun. I was able to remove the carburetor and successfully remove the intakes that were still on the motor. The back side of the motor shows where the pin or the peg for the belt has been glued in. Doesn't look like it's going to be too much of an issue here. And the same goes for here. It looks like they used just enough to hold the part in place. Success! It did come off with no problem. Here you can see the belt and pulley assembly that still has some of the dried up glue still on it. And the back of the motor looks pretty good. This will clean up again when we put it and all of the parts into the cleaner. And there you have it. Part 2 of the Revell Swine Hunt restoration and rebuild. Be sure to join us next time when we continue this project. We'll be putting the bits and pieces into an ultrasonic cleaner that will get rid of the paint, the glue, the schmutz, anything else that 54 years of whatever this has gone through has there. Thank you again. You can help support the channel by visiting our Patreon. And while you're there, buy Nala a treat. She loves those, and I appreciate it. That is it for this week, and I will catch you on the next one.